My friends, I want to ask you something tonight that almost no one has ever asked you, and I want you to take a moment with it. Because the answer to this question is, in a very literal sense, building your entire life. What have you been saying to yourself today? Not out loud, not in conversation with anyone else, inside. In the quiet, continuous, almost invisible conversation that has been running in your head from the moment you opened your eyes this morning. The conversation you have been having with yourself while you brushed your teeth, while you made the coffee, while you drove to work, while you waited in the queue, while you scrolled through your phone, while you walked from one room to another, while you sat at your desk doing nothing in particular. That conversation has not stopped even for a minute. It has been going since you woke up. It will keep going until you fall asleep tonight. And in the gap between, when you dream, a version of it continues. Now I want to tell you something that, once you really hear it, will change how seriously you take that conversation forever. That conversation is not just narration. That conversation is creation. The voice you have been listening to inside your own head all day, the running commentary, the soft mutter, the constant low-level talking to yourself that you have come to think of as just thinking, is not a passive accompaniment to your life. It is the active engine of your life. It is one of the most powerful forces operating inside you, and it has been operating mostly without supervision since you were old enough to have an inner life at all. This conversation is what the tradition calls the inner conversation, and tonight I am going to show you what it actually is, why it has been shaping every condition you find yourself in, and exactly how to begin, practically, specifically, starting tomorrow morning, to rewrite the voice you have been listening to all your life. Because once you learn how to do this, you have your hand on one of the most direct levers there is for changing the conditions of your outer world. Let me begin by helping you actually notice the conversation, because most people have lived with it for so long that it has become invisible to them. Sit for one moment and listen inwardly, not to me, to yourself. Notice that even as you listen to these words, somewhere just underneath them, there is a quiet inner voice. It might be commenting on what I am saying. It might be wondering whether this lecture is going to be useful. It might be drifting toward something else entirely, what you need to do tomorrow, an unfinished conversation from earlier, what to eat next. Whatever it is talking. There is a voice in there that does not stop. This voice, your inner voice, has been with you for as long as you can remember. It narrates your life constantly, beneath everything. It comments on what is happening, what just happened, what is about to happen. It rehearses conversations you have not yet had. It replays conversations you wish had gone differently. It judges, it worries, it plans, it scolds, it comforts, it catastrophizes, it dreams, it performs entire dramas of which other people and your own life are the subject. And it does this in such a continuous, low-level, automatic way that you have stopped noticing how much of your inner life is taken up by it. Try this experiment. For the next 5 minutes, simply observe your inner voice without trying to change it. Just listen. You will notice 3 things almost immediately. First, the voice never goes silent. There are pauses, but they are short, and then it begins again. Second, the voice almost always speaks about the same handful of topics, in the same handful of tones. Third, and this is the one that catches people, the voice almost always speaks as if you are speaking it. You experience it as your own thinking, your own commentary, your own honest internal narration. You do not experience it as a voice you are listening to. You experience it as a voice you are. This is the first and most important distinction this lecture will give you. You are not the voice. You are the one listening to the voice. The voice is something that happens inside the field of your awareness. You are the awareness inside which it happens. These are not the same. And until you can feel the difference, you will keep treating everything the voice says as if it were the truth, which it is not. It is simply what the voice has been trained to say. The voice was trained over many years by what surrounded you, by the way the adults in your life spoke to you to themselves, by the messages you absorbed again and again, until they became automatic, by your own repeated responses to the events of your life, which, the more you repeated them, became the grooves the voice now slides into automatically. The voice has habits. The voice has loops. The voice has a personality of its own, which was assembled mostly before you had any say in the assembling. And that voice has been narrating your life continuously in the language of those old habits and loops and grooves, every single day, beneath every action you have taken. And the conditions of your life have been responding faithfully to what the voice has been saying. Let me now show you why this voice matters so much. Because once you see this, you stop treating the inner conversation as harmless background noise and start treating it as what it actually is, the steady creative output of your inner life. The inner conversation is doing several things simultaneously in every moment. First, it is confirming and deepening your assumptions about reality. Every time the voice says, "Of course this is going to be hard," it deepens the assumption that life is hard. Every time the voice says, "They probably did not like me," it deepens the assumption that you are someone people do not like. Every time the voice says, "I always mess this up," it deepens the assumption that you are someone who messes things up. The voice is not merely commenting on reality. It is teaching itself again and again what reality is. Each repetition is a vote. The voice has been voting for thousands of repetitions, in some cases for decades, and the totality of those votes is the assumed reality you walk around inside. Second, it is shaping what you perceive. The voice's running commentary primes your nervous system to notice certain things and ignore others. If the voice has been narrating, "I am someone who has bad luck," your perception will scan on autopilot for evidence of bad luck. The good will pass through unnoticed. The bad will be highlighted, remembered, repeated to others. The voice is not just describing your life, it is selecting what gets seen as your life. And the selection feels like the truth, because you cannot see what you are not selecting for. Third, it is rehearsing the future. Every time the voice runs through how the difficult meeting tomorrow is going to go badly, it is practicing the bad outcome. It is laying down inner grooves that prepare your nervous system, your behavior, and your perception for exactly that. By the time the meeting arrives, you have walked into it 100 times inwardly, and each rehearsal increased the likelihood that the bad outcome would unfold. The voice has been writing the script. You then act it out and call it reality. Fourth, it is constantly broadcasting your identity. I am someone who. I am someone who. All day long. I am someone who never has enough time. I am someone who struggles with money. I am someone people overlook. I am someone whose relationships do not last. These are not innocent observations. These are identity declarations made hundreds of times a day, beneath your conscious notice, in the language of the inner voice. And the universe, that obedient mirror we have spoken about so often, is reading these declarations and arranging your life to match, not the wishes you make consciously for 10 minutes a day. The declarations the voice makes constantly, all day long, in the language of who you are. So the inner conversation is not noise. The inner conversation is the living, working, broadcasting voice of your assumptions. It is the running output of your self-concept. It is the deepest expression of what you are imagining about yourself and the world, in language continuously, in every unguarded moment. And the conditions of your life are downstream of it, not downstream of your conscious goals, not downstream of your written affirmations, but downstream of the constant, automatic, mostly invisible voice that has been narrating your existence under your breath since you were a child. This is why nothing else in this teaching matters as much as this one practice. Because if you change everything else, your beliefs, your visualizations, your affirmations, but leave the inner voice running its old loops, the voice will quietly undo the rest. It will narrate all day exactly what it has always narrated, and reality will respond faithfully to the narration, not to the affirmations. The voice is the broadcast. To change the broadcast, you have to rewrite the voice. I want to be very honest with you here, because there is a wrong way to approach this teaching, and I do not want you to waste time on it. The wrong approach is to try to silence the voice. People hear about the inner conversation and they think, right, the voice is the problem. I will simply stop the voice. They sit down, close their eyes, and try to make the voice go quiet. They will it. They strain against it. They notice it has started up again, and they push it down. For 10 seconds it stops, and then it begins, and they push again, and on, until they are exhausted and feeling worse than when they started. You cannot silence the voice, not by force, not for long. The voice is not a bug in your system. The voice is what your mind does. It is the natural verbal output of having an inner life. Trying to silence it permanently is like trying to stop a river from flowing because you do not like what it is carrying. The river will flow. The voice will speak. This is what these things do. The trick is not to silence the voice. The trick is to change what the voice is saying, not to stop the river, but to clean the water, not to end the conversation, but to take part in it. This is the great practical insight of this teaching, and the one almost no one is taught. You cannot stop the inner voice from running, but you can become the one who speaks into it. You can become an active participant in the conversation rather than a passive listener. You can begin deliberately to say back, to choose your own lines, to respond to the voice instead of being absorbed by it. And over time, not by force, but by repetition, the voice begins to incorporate your new lines into its default repertoire. The voice learns the new language. The river begins to carry different water. This is what the older teachers meant when they spoke of the inner conversation as something that could be directed. They did not mean silenced, they meant directed. The voice cannot be stopped, but the voice can be taught by you through repeated participation to say something other than what it has always said. And here is the wonderful part. Once you understand this, the practice becomes simple. You stop fighting the voice. You stop being afraid of what it might say. You simply begin, gently and steadily, to enter the conversation, and the conversation, after a while, begins to change. Let me show you exactly how the rewriting works, because this is where the lecture becomes practical. The voice runs on grooves. Every time it has said something, it is slightly more likely to say it again. The grooves deepen with repetition. The phrases the voice has run thousands of times have become almost reflexive. They appear automatically in response to certain triggers, with no decision involved. I am someone who never has enough time appears whenever you feel rushed. They probably do not like me appears whenever you have an awkward interaction. Of course, this is going wrong appears whenever something stumbles. The trigger fires, the groove activates, the line is spoken inwardly, and the assumption is reinforced without you even noticing. The rewriting works in the exact same way, except in reverse. You introduce new lines. You speak them deliberately, in response to the same triggers again and again. At first, the new lines feel forced. They feel false. They feel like you are saying something you do not really believe. This is normal. This is exactly what the rewriting feels like at the start, and it is not a sign that you are doing it wrong. What is happening is this. The new lines are creating new grooves, faint ones at first, so faint that the old grooves still activate more easily and the old lines still come automatically. But each time you speak the new line, the new groove deepens slightly. Each repetition is a small reinforcement, and eventually, with enough repetition over enough days, the new groove becomes strong enough that it begins to activate alongside the old one. Then, with more repetition, it begins to activate before the old one. Then, eventually, the old line stops appearing at all, because the new line has become the reflexive response. This is not a metaphor. This is how the brain works. Repetition creates pathways. Pathways become reflexes. Reflexes become defaults. The inner voice you have today is the default of decades of repetition. The inner voice you will have in a year is the default of whatever you spend the next year repeating. And here is the beautiful thing. You do not have to repeat the new lines with intensity. You do not have to feel them deeply each time. You do not have to convince yourself. You only have to speak them inwardly, again and again, in response to the situations that used to trigger the old lines. The repetition does the work. The grooves form, whether you feel them or not. This is why the inner conversation is one of the most powerful tools in this entire teaching. It does not require special states. It does not require quiet rooms. It does not require any conditions at all. It only requires that you participate in the running conversation that is already happening, and that you speak deliberately the lines you want to become reflexive, in place of the lines you have inherited. So let me now give you the specific practice, not as theory, as something you can do, starting tonight and continuously throughout tomorrow. Step 1. Catch one line. You will not be able to rewrite the entire inner voice all at once. You do not need to. You only need to begin with one recurring line, the most common loop the voice runs, the phrase you hear yourself saying inwardly, again and again, that keeps confirming the very condition you want to change. Listen for it. Catch it. Name it. I am someone who never has enough money. I am someone who is always behind. I am someone who is not really wanted. I am someone whose body never cooperates. Whatever the specific line is, find one. Hear it. Recognize it as a line, not a truth. This recognition itself is enormous. Most people have never separated themselves from their inner voice enough to hear it as a line. They simply live inside the line, taking it as reality. The moment you catch the line and see it as a line, an old sentence the voice has been repeating for years, you have already broken its full power over you. You have stepped even slightly outside it. From outside, you can begin to change it. Step 2. Write the replacement. Choose the line you want to become reflexive in its place, not the opposite extreme, not something so far from where you are now that it feels absurd. Just the next true line, the line that is one step toward the version of you who has what you want. If the old line is I am someone who never has enough money, the replacement is not I am a millionaire. That gap is too wide. The voice will not accept it, and the rewriting will fail. The replacement is something more like I am someone for whom money flows easily, or I am someone who has more than enough, or money tends to find its way to me. These are lines the voice can accept, gradually because they are not too far from where you are. They are a step. They are believable enough to begin grooving. Write your replacement line down somewhere you will see it tomorrow. The act of writing it makes it specific, and specificity is what makes the rewriting actually take hold. Vague intentions do not groove. Specific lines do. Step 3. Use the replacement every time the trigger fires. The trigger is whatever situation usually makes the old line appear. The bill arriving, the bank balance check, the thought about money. Whenever the trigger fires and the old line begins to play, do not fight it. Simply, gently, say the new line afterward. Of course, this is too expensive. Wait. I am someone for whom money flows easily. You will say it without feeling. That is fine. You will say it and the old line will feel more true. That is fine too. The point is not to win the inner argument in that moment. The point is to place the new line into the conversation. Each placement is a vote. Each placement is a small reinforcement of the new groove. After enough placements, the new groove will begin to activate alongside the trigger, and then before the trigger, and eventually instead of the trigger. Do not measure how much you believe the new line on any given day. Belief is a result of the practice, not a prerequisite for it. Belief comes from the groove, and the groove comes from repetition. Speak the line. Let belief catch up. Step 4. Use the inner conversation deliberately in the unguarded moments. The kettle, the cue, the walk, the breath between tasks, the drive. In these moments, your voice will run on default. Its old loops, its old phrases, its old commentary. Begin to deliberately fill these moments with the new lines, not as affirmations performed with effort, as casual inner speech, the way you would mutter to yourself anyway, except about the version of you you are becoming. Of course I have time. Of course this is working out. Of course money is easy. Of course people are drawn to me. Of course I am the one this happens for. Drop these in casually, the way the old voice has been dropping in its lines for years. They are not affirmations, they are inner conversation. The same kind of low-level inner speech the voice has always been making, only redirected. And because they have the same texture as the old conversation, the brain accepts them in the same way. They begin to groove almost without you realizing it. Step 5. Use the threshold of sleep. In the final minute before sleep, the inner conversation is at its most absorbent. Whatever the voice is saying at that moment sinks deeper than at any other time of day. So use this minute deliberately. Run inwardly the new lines. Say them gently, with the casual tone of someone for whom they are simply true. I am someone for whom money flows easily. I am someone things work out for. I am someone who is loved. Let these be the last lines the voice speaks before sleep takes you. Carry them across the threshold. This single minute, repeated nightly, will move more grooves than an hour of effort during the day, because the threshold of sleep is where the voice gets to write deeply into the underlying layer, and what it writes there shapes everything that follows. Step 6. Be gentle when the old voice returns. It will return, dozens of times a day at first. You will catch yourself again and again running the old lines. This is not failure. This is the practice itself. Each catching is an act of awareness. Each return to the new line is a vote. The grooves rebuild through the catchings, not in their absence. Do not shame the voice. Do not be at war with it. Speak to it the way you might speak to an old friend who has been saying the same thing for years out of habit. I hear you. I know that is what we have been saying. Let's try saying something else now. And then gently place the new line. The shift happens through patience, not force. So here is what I want you to take with you tonight, into every unguarded moment of tomorrow, and every moment for the rest of your life. The voice in your head is not just narration, it is creation. It has been running continuously beneath every action you have taken, broadcasting your assumptions, shaping your perception, rehearsing your future, and declaring your identity to a universe that has been faithfully responding. The conditions of your life have not been arriving from outside. They have been arriving from inside, as the inevitable consequence of what the voice has been saying all day, every day, mostly without your supervision. But you are not the voice. You are the one listening to it. And the one listening to it can speak back. The one listening to it can teach the voice new lines. The one listening to it can, through patient and consistent repetition, change the entire conversation, and watch slowly as the conditions of life begin to reorganize themselves around the new things the voice is saying. This is the most direct and practical lever you have. It does not require special states. It does not require silence. It does not require techniques. It only requires that you begin to participate in the conversation that is already happening, and that you choose deliberately what gets spoken inside you again and again until the new lines become as automatic as the old ones once were. Tonight, before you sleep, do one thing. Find the one line, the one phrase the voice has been repeating that has been quietly building the life you are trying to lead. Hear it, name it, write its replacement. Speak the replacement gently into the silence before sleep, as casually as you would mutter anything else to yourself. Let it be the last thing the voice says tonight. Tomorrow, when the trigger fires, place the new line again, and again, and again, in the kettle, in the queue, in the breath between tasks, without strain, without performance, just quietly, persistently, beginning to teach the voice a new vocabulary. Within weeks, you will catch yourself, in an ordinary moment, speaking the new line without prompting. And you will know in that moment that the rewriting has begun. The grooves are forming, the voice is learning, and the conditions of your life, slowly and then suddenly, will begin to follow. The voice has been writing your life since you were a child, Tonight you take up the pen, speak the line you want to live inside of, and listen over the coming months as the world begins to speak it back. Thank you and good evening. This is Best of Lectures. I will see you in the next video.